What are the most important questions the Carolina Panthers must answer during training camp and the preseason? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday. Your team every day. That is our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free right here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're beginning again next Friday on the 26th. I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions either at me or DM me to get those questions in starting next week for the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are over and the NFL season is almost here, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. This time next week, the Panthers would have already had 1 day of training camp practice. They'll be on day 2 this time next Thursday, and I cannot wait for training camp to be here. And training camp it's great, but it's also not great. You have the team back out on the field practicing, but you don't have the games. It doesn't really get started for me until toe meets leather in September, but I understand the appetite is always going to be there for what's going on in training camp. But there are so many things the Panthers actually need to get answered during camp before they even head into the 2024 regular season. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the most important questions the Panthers need to answer during training camp and also during the preseason, because training camp technically is only until August 15th. The Panthers would already had 1 preseason game against the Patriots on the road. Then they'd be preparing for their second preseason game against the Jets here at Bank of America Stadium. And then they'll have their final game, the dress rehearsal against Buffalo the week after that. So the training camp technically is between the 24th of this month and it ends on August 15th with a preseason game sandwich in between and then one right at the end once training camp is over. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. The most important questions that must be answered in training camp, and I'm also going to say in the preseason. I have 6 of them that I feel like the Panthers need to answer. Number 1, helping Bryce Young. That's what the Panthers needed to do this offseason. They did that by hiring Dave Canales. They did that by bringing in Diontae Johnson via trade. Adam Thielen is back. They brought in Xavier Legette, and they brought in a host of players on the offensive line and some other skill position players also on this offense, which is all well and good. But looking at things right now, Diontae Johnson, Adam Thielen feel like the only sure things, if you can call them sure things, heading in to this 2024 season, considering that they are experienced veterans who have played at a Pro Bowl level in the past. And even going back to last season for Adam Thielen here in Carolina, he was excellent in a room full of not excellent wide receivers. And Diontae Johnson has had his issues the last 2 years in Pittsburgh, but look at it. Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett were his quarterbacks. Clearly things aren't going to go the way he would like to have gone when he had a Hall of Famer in Big Ben Roethlisberger. So my first question that the Panthers need to answer is, who are going to be the playmakers in the receiving game outside of Diontae Johnson and Adam Thielen? Yes, those are your top 2 guys. Diontae is going to be the X, going to be the first read that Bryce Young makes, and that has been stated multiple times by Dave Canales and the rest of the personnel on this offense. Adam Thielen going to be back in the slot, going to be expected to play another big role. Will he have 100 receptions, 1,000 yards receiving again this season? I doubt that will be the case, but I still think he's going to produce at a fairly high level considering the expectations for him heading into this year in Carolina. But the rest of them, they have to do something, because last year it was really only Adam. DJ Chark did not hold his end of the bargain. Jonathan Mingo, as a rookie, was largely invisible. And then Laviska Shenault was injured. You didn't get anything out of Terrace Marshall. Once again, Ihmir Smith-Marsette came in the latter part of the season more as a gadget player, not really truly seen as a wide receiver in the offense that they ran last season. More guys got to step up outside of the top two in Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. The first two that are in line to do that are Jonathan Mingo, who's going to be a second-year player after having a disappointing rookie year, maybe with another year of experience being in this new system, he'll be ready to go and can be the wide receiver 3 if that's the role he's able to play, or at least be a solid wide receiver 4 for the Panthers this season. The main expectations are going to be placed upon, of course, Xavier Legette, who the Panthers trade up into the first round to take to be their future possible wide receiver number 1. He was outstanding last year at South Carolina. You look at him, he has the physical build. We've heard the DK Metcalf comparisons, which are going to come for a player who looks like that and playing for a staff that came from Seattle and took a player like DK Metcalf not too long ago. And Xavier Legette was, again, outstanding last year at South Carolina and will have the opportunity, like Mingo had last year, to step in and immediately play the role as the third wide receiver on this team. Where he lines up on the outside, maybe the inside, that will be interesting to see as Dave Canales continue to put this offense together, as they're going to go through installs once they get to training camp, and then we'll start seeing some competition after that. Then you get to the preseason, we'll really get an understanding of what role they want him to play. That is something that's going to be important. The Panthers got to find someone other than Johnson and Thielen at wide receiver who can catch the ball and do something with it. And also at tight end, they used their first pick there in the 4th round, pick 101, on Jatavion Sanders, who outside of Brock Bowers was the next best tight end in college football last season, was outstanding the last 2 years at Texas with Quinn Ewers as his quarterback. Steve Sarkisian, one of the best play callers there in college football. Is he ready to contribute right away? If not, is Tommy Tremble going to take another step forward? Last season, once Hayden Hurst went down, he ascended to the tight end 1 role. He was one of the guys that Bryce Young was looking to in the passing game. The numbers weren't sexy, but still, you've seen that Tommy Tremble is developing into a better option in the pass game at tight end. Will he ever be a premier option or even like a above league average? I doubt that will be the case, but could he still be a valuable asset in the passing game in this offense with all the other weapons the Panthers have brought in and guys who are going to be reads before Tommy Tremble? Sure. Why can't that be the case? So that will be interesting to see what role that Trimble is able to play as Jatavion Sanders gets acclimated to the NFL and learns the other nuances of the tight end position. And does someone like Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who last year, as I mentioned earlier, was just a gadget guy, does he get to run routes and actually be a part of the offense as a true wide receiver? Or is he going to be in the same role last year where they just can expect him to be a punt return or something to look out for? And this is the final year for Terrace Marshall Jr., someone who I thought would have made sense for the Panthers to cut him. They only would have saved about $1 million. They could still do that and save $1 million against the salary cap going into the season. Not the most cap space in the world that they would pick up. But TMJ showed us something at the end of his second year in the NFL when Steve Wilkes was the head coach here. We did not see him much at all last year. Had a career day against the Vikings and against the Lions. The next game, Frank Reich literally forgot to play him. And we saw the last time out he played week 18 after missing all those games as a healthy scratch, and lines up incorrectly, brings back a touchdown. And you could see why Frank Reich would probably forget about a player like Terrace Marshall Jr. But Dave Canales has mentioned him by name as somebody who's interested to see what he looks like once the pads go on. That's when we really find out who these guys are going to be. We've seen who Terrace Marshall has been so far. Will he live up to the hype of a second-round pick and someone who a lot of teams had a first-round grade on if it did not have to factor into the injury that he had coming out of LSU? So that's my first question. Who are going to be playmakers in a receiving game outside of Deontay Johnson? Number 2, who is going to be healthy at edge rusher? Jadeveon Clowney, he comes in homecoming, high expectations for a player who was the number 1 pick in the draft over a decade ago and has not necessarily lived up to that hype and that billing, but has been a solid player when healthy. And he's dealt with a lot of health issues since leaving Houston. He also said that he hadn't really felt that comfortable in the defenses that he's been in until last season in Baltimore. And he chose this defense because it's very similar to the one he ran in Houston the last time he really had back-to-back consistent seasons like the Panthers are hoping he's going to have, coming from Baltimore, having 9.5 sacks last year, and coming here to Carolina, taking over the role that Brian Burns played last season, and even potentially elevating, in my mind, their run defense to be able to set the edge this upcoming season. I feel like I know what the Panthers should get out of Jadeveon Clowney. I think they're going to get a solid player. Will he give him double-digit sacks? I don't know, but he can get 9.5 like he did last year. You'll take that certainly, and he'll be an impact player. He says when healthy, he is a Pro Bowler. Now, it's going to be difficult to be that if the rest of the guys in that position group aren't healthy themselves. DJ Woodham, who the Panthers also signed in free agency to come in and be a starter at one of the edge rusher spots, missed the entire offseason program as he continues to recover from a quad tear suffered last season in Minnesota. From the information I was told way back in the spring, it was looking like one of them was not going to be ready to go even early on in training camp. We'll find out next week as he's supposed to report on the 23rd. Practice will start on the 24th, whether he is going to start off on PUP or if he's going to be limited or if he's going to be full go once training camp begins. My thought is he's likely going to be limited, if not on PUP. Those are the two options, more so than him being full go. We will see. We also found out during the offseason that Amari Barno, who missed the final 2 games of the season last year, tore his ACL in that Week 16 loss against the Green Bay Packers. That takes away a third-year player who could have been stepping up into a role as a more premier edge rusher for the Panthers this year rotationally. DJ Johnson, he's back at Culiota, someone who the last staff really liked, and they're still the same defensive staff is here. He was suffering from an injury, and Dave Canales mentioned him by name as someone who needed to work their way back during the summer break they had in between the end of mandatory minicamp at the beginning of training camp. So that's 3 guys in Woodham, Barno, and Leota, all at the edge rusher spot who are battling injuries. And now DJ Johnson, he's got to step up and be the starter if Woodham's not ready to go. Kayvon Chason, who has been a bust so far during his career coming out of LSU as a first-round pick at that edge rusher spot in Jacksonville, he has not shown to be a great player, which is what he said last weekend, that he can be a great player for the Panthers, which is what Carolina absolutely needs him to be. If they're not going to have Woodham, they're not going to have Barno for a large portion of the season, if at all, as far as Barno's sake goes. Woodham should be ready at some point in time. I just need to know who's going to be healthy at edge rusher. It's me, Clowney, and then who else is going to be? DJ Johnson, he had his own knock during their practice during OTA's mandatory minicamp back in June as well, but he didn't seem to be that big of a deal. But still, you can't suffer any more injuries at that spot if the Panthers are hoping to elevate the pass rush from what it was last year, where it was last in the league at pressure percentage and in sacks. So that is my second question. Who is going to be healthy at edge rusher and who is going to be ready to contribute come week 1 and beyond? So we have 4 more questions that I also think the Panthers need to answer once we get to training camp, and I'll talk about those here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that your small business are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get back to the questions the Panthers must answer during training camp and the preseason. Question number 3. The Panthers need to find out whether they have enough quality cornerback depth and just talent in that room. This is probably, aside from edge rusher, the position group I have the most concerns about. I'm not super concerned about quarterback because the offensive line should be better. I think the wide receiver room is going to be better. Tight end, still questions there, but I think it should be improved. There's enough veteran players in there. I don't know how big of a jump they're going to make. They should make a leap from last year, which we talked about on yesterday's show. Defensive line, still concerns there. Linebacker, not so much as long as Shaq and Josie Jewell stay healthy. Safety should all around be fine, but corner, as we've seen, J.C. Horn has not been able to stay healthy. And I hate to say it, but you kind of have to assume he's going to miss time, considering that's been the case the last 3 years. And if he's going to miss time, it leaves Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, Cha Smith-Wade, the 5th-round pick out of Washington State, and a bunch of other largely inexperienced players. DiCaprio, Boodle, and Deshaun Jameson, of course, both last year had to play a couple of games as starters, and they played all right when stepping up in that situation. But there's not the most quality depth here in Carolina right now. If anyone, whether it be JC, Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, if any of those three go down for any significant period of time, this is going to be a pretty tenuous situation for that cornerback room in Carolina. Like, it feels like they need to add at least one more starter caliber player to the position group at some point in time, whether it be once training camp begins next week, you get into it, and they decide to do it during the preseason, right before roster cutdowns like last year. That's when they added Troy Hill going into that final preseason game. The Monday of that week is when the Panthers signed Troy Hill, who already understood the system. And you have to, I guess, look around at some players who have been in the scheme before, who could come in and easily find their way onto the field and not need to have that long of a period of time to reacclimate themselves, really learn what they're trying to do. That's something to understand. And I don't know if Stephon Gilmore has necessarily played in the defense that Ejiro Evero is trying to run. That's a name that we, of course, have talked about plenty on the show throughout the offseason. There's really no update. And I saw someone actually, there was an update where Gilmore just talked about there's still quality players out there like him and Justin Simmons, who are secondary players. Simmons, who has ties to this staff, having played for one season there in Denver under Ejiro Evero. The Panthers seem to be set at safety, so I don't think he's going to be coming in here unless there is an injury. Knock on wood, don't want to see that happen, of course. But he was talking about, he being Stephon Gilmore, that there's not 64 corners that are better than him in the NFL. And that certainly is the case. There's not 64 that guys are better than him. And I would look at this roster. I don't think Dane Jackson's a better player than Stephon Gilmore. Troy Hill, who would play a different role, but he's not a better player than Stephon Gilmore. The Panthers, they would be doing themselves a service if they'd go out there and get him, and they'd be doing some a disservice if they don't even try to bring in another player of the quality of Stephon Gilmore, who is available and, of course, lives in the area and has ties to the team, having played here before. But J.C. Horn, Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, plus a veteran starting caliber corner feels like the right combination for this team heading into 2024 if they want to have any sort of success at the cornerback spot. Really, outside of just if JC's healthy, like, they're in a good spot as far as that spot goes. But other than that, got some young guys, some guys who are older, and also a player, and Dane Jackson's got to prove himself, who has experience being a starting corner for a playoff team playing in the playoffs. I just think they need to add some other piece there. And here's the thing too. The Panthers, they replaced Dante Jackson, but they haven't really replaced CJ Henderson. Understanding last year it was JC, it was Dante, it was CJ. That was the trio that the Panthers going into the season expecting to play a ton at the corner spot. Then, of course, JC gets injured. You got to play CJ Henderson more. Dante stays healthy, which is great. But you look at it, the snap percentages last season, CJ Henderson played 56% of the snaps last year. Dane Jackson in Buffalo, as their third corner, played 50% of the snaps in Buffalo. Dante Jackson played 91% of the snaps. So if you're replacing Dante Jackson with a player who only played half the snaps in Buffalo, and understand that he was not playing to be the starter, where Dante was the primary starter at corner, especially once JC went down, it seems like you need to find someone else you can come in and really want to play 90%, 80% of the snaps also. So I just think that they need to find someone. If Dane Jackson be the replacement of Dante Jackson, they need to find someone who's going to be a true replacement of CJ Henderson and take those 56% of snaps they're going to lose, or at least they have lost, as Henderson is now with the Houston Texans. So do the Panthers have enough quality corners? Something they need to figure out. And considering where they're going to be sitting on the waiver wire, they are in a good spot to be able to get a player if they need to once roster cutdowns happen later on in August. Number 4 goes back to health. Is Jonathan Brooks going to be ready to go week 1? Brooks tore his ACL late last year at Texas. Ian Rappaport reported once the Panthers took him in the draft that he should be cleared by July 1. I have not seen anything that suggests that he has been cleared. He has to report to training camp tomorrow on Friday, the 19th. And then next week, we'll find out probably on the 23rd. That's veteran move-in day. That's when we'll hear from Dave Canales. I'm sure we'll also hear from Dan Morgan, hear from some other veterans as well on that Wednesday as they report to Cedar Street, Uptown Charlotte for training camp instead of going down to Wofford, which is still kind of weird that that's the case here this season. So we'll find out really next week whether he is cleared to go or if he's going to have to start off on PUP or if he's going to be limited or if he's going to be full go. That's something the Panthers need to know as they got to figure out what their running back rotation is going to be. Chuba Hubbard clearly comes in as RB1 and maybe he's going to be RB1A to Jonathan Brooks's RB1B at some point in time this season. But right now, as we sit here, not knowing the status of Jonathan Brooks heading into the season, it's Chuba's show. And even if Brooks was healthy, it should be Chuba's show to start off the season, where then Brooks, he can do a couple more things just versatility-wise in the pass game that you're not going to ask Hubbard to do, where he could maybe take over that role as we get later on into the season. That may be the case anyways once he is healthy, of course, but they need to know. Is it going to be Chuba plus Miles Sanders, or is it going to be Chuba and Jonathan Brooks, maybe a little bit of Miles Sanders if you want to go down that route? And we also can talk about Rashad Penny if you'd like, as far as guys who could factor in at the running back position here in Carolina. So figuring out whether Jonathan Brooks can be ready to go week one, that obviously is important as he was their second round pick. And some of the Panthers, they have a plan for. Brooks talked about that's what made him comfortable coming here to Carolina, that they presented the best plan. Not like you got to choose where he was going to go, but still, it's good to know that he feels comfortable what they want him to do to get ready to go this season and also to be their bell cow in the seasons to come here in Carolina. A couple more questions Panthers must answer heading into training camp and throughout the preseason. I'll talk about those here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with the playoffs over, Major League Baseball going on, and not much else, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/locked-on and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. There are two more questions the Panthers must answer heading into training camp. And when I was thinking about the questions that the Panthers need to answer, I thought about the offensive line. I thought about Ike Ekwonu and him needing to bounce back and reestablish himself as the Panthers franchise left tackle, something we talked about when breaking down the tackle position back in June. And yeah, obviously it's a question, but we know that he's going to be the starting left tackle when the season begins. And if he struggles, they have a guy like Josh Nijman who can come in and can be that starter if need be. Brady Christensen is still on this roster and maybe could start on the outside at left tackle as well. But we know Ike's going to be the left tackle to start off the season. We also know that Austin Corbett, where there's questions about his transition from right guard to center, playing center for the first time in his career, even though he says his college head coach dating back to Nevada felt like if he wanted to be a player that played in the NFL for a long time, that eventually he would have to play center. And here we are. Austin Corbett is finally a center in the NFL after playing a right guard at a fairly high level for the Panthers 2 years ago. And before that with the Los Angeles Rams, and even a period of time where I guess he had more struggles with the Cleveland Browns where he started off his career, but still he's finally made it home, I suppose, at center. So there's questions about that, but there's not a question whether he's going to start at center this upcoming season. And of course, plenty of questions about Bryce Young, but I don't think these are questions that are going to be answered during training camp. The only question you can really answer when it comes to Bryce Young is like, well, is he ready to go? Is he the right guy? That's something that we're not going to find out until they start playing actual games that matter. Right now, you're still focused on Bryce understanding the offense, being a leader, his mechanics, his relationship with Dave Canales, all of that. But as far as is he the right guy, well, some of y'all have already answered that question. But as far as answering that question this year, you need the Panthers to play the games before you can answer that. So just want to address that for anyone wondering why not bring up offensive line, why not bring up Bryce Young. We know who's going to start in the offensive line, and we're not going to know. Really, I guess we kind of, well, let's not say kind of, we did get a glimpse last year during the preseason of the struggles to come with the offensive line. my hope is we don't see those struggles again, especially when they face off against the Jets again. And Quinnen Williams, who racked up nearly a dozen sacks during that joint practice last year that was highlighted thanks to HBO's Hard Knocks. But here's the last two questions I was thinking. Both of them pertain to special teams. Who is going to kick? The Panthers need to figure that out. Eddie Pinheiro should be the kicker. I don't think there should be a competition, but Pinheiro is not there for the offseason portion, which is, of course, voluntary. He was there for mandatory minicamp. Did not want to answer why he was not available. We are assuming he wasn't available because his contract is not nearly as good as it should be for the third most accurate kicker in the history of the NFL, which still is just like mind-boggling. Did not realize Pinheiro was that accurate until he brought it up. I love the guy who knows his stats. He let us all know, I'm the third most accurate kicker in the history of the league. Give me my money, even though he didn't say that, but he did. Harrison Mevis out of Mizzou. He's here now, the thicker kicker, big leg, probably bigger leg than Eddie, but is he going to be as accurate? Highly unlikely, but they're maybe going to have a competition. So we'll see who's going to be the kicker. It should be Eddie. And also when it comes to kicking, like kickoffs, how are they going to handle the whole situation with the kicker and kicking off with the new rule changes this upcoming season? So who's going to kick is a question the Panthers need to figure out. It should be Eddie Pinheiro. They should also give the man his money and stop fooling around, or if they want to wait until next offseason, okay, you can do that. I just think a deal for Pinheiro would make sense if you're Carolina, and also if you're Eddie Pinheiro, who certainly deserves it. And then the other one goes kind of hand in hand with that. I'm wondering how they're going to handle kickoffs. Who's going to return kickoffs this upcoming season, as the NFL has changed the kickoff rules to essentially force teams to return kicks after a NFL record low amount of kicks return a season ago. And it's one of the things I wonder, like, I remember playing flag football at the YMCA when I was like, I don't know, like 9 or 10, and they always put the ball at whatever yard line it was. At last year, the way things were going to the NFL, they might as well have just put the ball at the 20 or 25 every single game. And after the kickoff, just moved on from there instead of even going through the exercise, which is why the NFL has decided, let's bring this back to the sport while also trying to find a way to make it safer with the way they have guys lined up. And we talked about this, I want to say it was last Friday, maybe it was Monday. Whenever it was, talk special teams recently. It might have been, I can't remember. All the days are coming to get back together. But we talked about this recently. So go check out that show as we talk more in depth about the actual rules. We're trying to figure out who's going to return kicks, as that's going to be important this season. Xavier Legette, Raheem Blackshear appear to be the most logical options heading into training camp. There are going to be some other players out there who could also potentially find a way to return kicks and also find a way on their roster by doing that special teams wise. So we need to figure out who's going to be kicking it, which I think should be Pinheiro. Also need to figure out who's going to be returning kicks this upcoming season and whether someone else is going to step up and maybe take over that role. I'm hoping Legette is able to really just take control of that along with Blackshear, and those two become a pretty dynamic tandem back there for the Panthers and set them up in better field position. Did not have great field position last year because of the defense. Well, not the defense, because the offense just being terrible and not able to ever move the ball. And then the defense also just not necessarily always getting kind of stops, but that was really on them. Injuries happened and the offense was terrible. You know, the whole deal. So there it is. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where next Friday, and I probably should have done it tomorrow because I'm thinking about to talk about tomorrow, and I'm like, training camp stuff. There's other things I can talk about, but probably should just answer your questions instead. Hopefully I'm answering your questions by doing these shows. Either way, at me, DM me to get those questions in for next Friday, July 26th, for the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I will talk to you, of course, on Friday.